All right, what we're looking at here is how a nerve signal moves down an axon. So here you have your nerve cell, and this long line here is an axon. Of course, it's often covered up by Schwann cells. I like to say Schwann cells. But if we look at the axon and how it works, we notice that it has many proteins in its membrane. This is the membrane of the axon. And that's a protein that's in the membrane. And that protein will open up like a door to let things in and out. And it's these proteins that are special in causing an electrical impulse to be sent down a nerve cell. They figured this out by studying squid nerves, because squids have the biggest, thickest nerves. The reason why that is because invertebrates don't have myelin. So the only way they can get their nerve impulse to move quickly is to grow them very large. Because large nerves move signals faster than small ones do. So giant squids develop these huge nerves. They're so big, you can see them. They're not like little tiny ropes. They're like shoestrings, you know. That's not a squid. That's an eel. Oh, will the nerve shock you? No, it's not. I'll show you how the signal works. It's not quite like that. Giant squid, yeah. Why are you coughing?
I actually have a
Don't worry about my phone. Just let it ring. Now, if we look, quiet please. If we look at a nerve cell, we can see it's got positive charges outside the cell and negative charges inside the cell. Those charges are due to what we call ions, charged particles. And what we're going to do is we're going to look at those in detail here, but the charged particles that we're interested in are sodium and potassium. And I'm going to forward through a few slides here. Here we go. The resting state of a nerve cell has sodium ions on the outside of the axon and potassium ions on the inside of the axon. In this circular tube here you see, that's the axon. Okay? Now, when they first measured this, all they had to do with the big squid neurons is stick an electrode inside the axon, and they could get a reading of its charge. And it read around -70. -70 is the charge that the axon is on the inside. Now, the reason why it gives a negative charge is it's negative on the inside compared to the outside. Because on the inside, it not only has this positively charged potassium, but it also has some negatively charged proteins that are not shown. And overall, that gives it a lot lower charge than on the outside that only has positively charged sodium ions. Now, hopefully you remember from chemistry that atoms can take on a charge by gaining or losing electrons. Do you remember that? If you lose an electron, you become a positively charged atom. And so these are sodium atoms that have lost an electron, so they're positively charged. Now, what's going to happen here is when an impulse comes along, when an impulse moves down a nerve fiber, what you have is you have little gates, those little proteins that are lying in the membrane here, and they're opening, and they let the sodium rush inside. And when these sodium ions come inside, briefly, you have an inside that has all these positive sodiums as well as the positive potassiums, and the electrical charge rises way up. It goes from negative 70 on the inside all the way up to about positive 30 on the inside. And that's when those sodiums move in. And so we call this, when that happens, when those little protein gates open and the sodiums rush in, we call that depolarization of the neuron. Yes?
After those come in, is it like you're saying almost yesterday, do they all follow that pattern?
I'm going to show you what happens next. So the sodiums rush in, and very quickly the potassiums, these positively charged potassiums that were on the inside, will go out. And so if we were just measuring the charge right here, the charge would go way up when the sodiums came in, but it would go back down when the potassiums go out. And to understand this fully, you have to see it in motion. And that's why I have this video here, and this video really shows it all, or most of it. This guy's going to say it, and then I'm going to explain it. So pay attention here. There's a lot of questions about this on the test.
How does an action potential occur? When a neuron is not transmitting a signal, there is a separation of charge across its membrane. This is called the resting potential. Sodium is in high concentration outside, and potassium is in high concentration inside the cell. The cytoplasm is negative relative to the exterior because of the presence of negatively charged proteins, amino acids, and other substances. When a sufficiently large stimulus reaches a section of membrane, sodium is able to diffuse in across the membrane following its concentration gradient. This depolarizes the membrane and is the stimulus for similar changes in adjacent membrane. Thus, the action potential travels down the axon in a chain reaction. After sodium diffuses in, potassium diffuses out following its own concentration gradient. This restores the membrane's polarity, but sodium and potassium have switched positions. The sodium-potassium pump restores these ions to their original positions, and the neuron is now ready for another action potential.
Okay, so hold on. So here we go. So we're looking at one of these nodes of Ranvier, because this is the only place where it happens. It doesn't happen underneath the Schwann cells for some reason. I'm not sure why. But if you look at the node real close, if this signal's coming along, it causes the little proteins, the little gates, are sensitive to this positive charge. And they will open, the little gates open, and the sodiums rush in. Come on, sodiums. There we go. The sodiums rush in, and very briefly we're positively charged on the inside. There are little channels in the membrane that let potassium out, and they are sensitive to a positive charge on the inside. So when it becomes positively charged on the inside, the potassium channels open and let the potassium out. So you can see the potassium comes out right here. There, you can see, if you just watch at the beginning here, the potassium comes out. And what happens is further down the line, sodium channels right here in the membrane are sensitive to a positive charge over here. So if we back this up a little bit, this sodium channel feels the positive charge there and will open. And that causes this sodium to be able to go in next to it. And then further down, the sodium channels feel that charge and they open. So what you get is a charge moving from left to right, but what it actually is, it's just these sodium channels open, then these sodium channels open, then these sodium channels open, then these sodium channels open, and as the sodium rush in, it creates that positive charge on the inside that just moves down the axon like dominoes. Open, 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 open. Sodium, 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 and this positive charge looks like it's moving this way. It's kind of like a wave of motion down the axon. Do y'all see what I'm saying?
After the charge is gone through, it goes back to its normal?
Yeah, so after the charge comes through, so the sodium rushes in, and the potassium's going to go back out. So really, after the charge has gone through all the way, the sodium and potassium have switched sides. So they need to be switched back so we can send another signal through. So there's another protein, a third protein in the membrane here. It's called the sodium-potassium pump. And it switches the two. It's a switching protein. It takes in a potassium and puts out a sodium and switches it all back.
What causes it to do that?
It's sensitive. It's basically, if it detects, let's go back to this situation, it's sensitive to potassium on this side and sodium on this side. And if it finds potassium, potassium has a certain shape. Potassium on the outside will bind to the protein. And sodium on the inside has a certain shape, and it'll bind to the protein. And when those two things bind, it switches over. It kind of changes its shape. So it does it automatically because of the shape that it has.
What if you had like a sodium or a potassium deficiency?
Then your nerves won't work. And that's what will happen to you if you don't eat enough salt. You're right.
Is that why they were talking about how people were always trying to eat salt in like the Middle Ages, but now they're like, don't eat too much salt?
Yeah, well now we have got an excess of it. Yes, but in places where there's not enough salt, you can have deficiencies that can cause your nerves not to work. And so you have to have plenty of sodium and potassium, which slowly wash out of your body, and so you got to replace them by eating. So salt is good, because salts contain sodium and potassium.
What happens if you eat too much salt?
If you eat too much salt, then the leftover salt hangs out in your blood, and that causes water to be maintained in your blood, because water follows the salt. And that's the principles of diffusion and osmosis that you hopefully learned in biology. And so what happens if you eat a bunch of salt, you get salt in your blood, you get a lot of water in your blood volume goes way up, and that's called high blood pressure. Because it's like the blood is stretching all your arteries and veins real wide, and that's what high blood pressure is. It usually comes from people who eat too much salt. And then your heart has trouble pumping your blood around. Your kidneys have trouble straining your blood. High blood pressure is bad for pretty much every organ, because your organs aren't made to have that much blood going through them. And so it can cause all sorts of health problems. You kids don't usually need to worry about high blood pressure because you're running around a lot playing sports and you sweat. And when you sweat, you lose most of that sodium. And so you're always hungry, wanting to eat salty foods to put the sodium back because of all the sports you play. What happens is you'll get old, and your knees will start hurting, and you'll be lazier, and you won't want to play sports as much. But you're used to eating all that salty food, and you don't change your habits, and that's what tastes good to you, salty stuff, and so you continue to eat that, and that's why old people usually have high blood pressure. Because they stop working out and they're still eating like they were when they were kids. So you got to do one of two things as you get old. You got to change your diet, stop eating so much salty food, which is not fun, or you got to keep exercising, which is harder and harder to do. Like I have trouble doing it because I have bad knees and it hurts to play basketball or something like that, or tennis or whatever.
Is that why old people go to like steam rooms just so they can sweat a lot?
Yeah, that would help them. Yeah. Anytime you can sweat, it releases a lot of the salt. Y'all understand this? That's the reading tonight. The reading is basically just understanding this. So what happens is when that positive charge reaches the end of the axon, let's go back to yesterday. Most books talk about the synapse after they do the nerve signal. But when that positive charge reaches the end of the axon, that causes these neurotransmitters to be released so that the cell can then communicate with the next cell down and pass the signal on. So that's happening right now. Millions of times a second in your body, nerve signals are being sent. There's a constant constantly thousands of signals go from your eyes to your brain, just telling the brain what it's seeing. And from your ears to the brain, telling the brain what it's hearing. So just sitting there doing nothing, you got a constant flow of signals, electrical signals. And it takes energy because it takes ATP to switch those ions back to their original concentration. That takes energy in the cell. So you got to keep eating to supply that energy. It's a really cool system. And I wanted to show you about 10 minutes of a video that shows a guy crashing his car and what happens to him. And it talks about the nervous system, and it's kind of a cool video. And we're going to watch a little bit of this each day until Friday. So, whoops. So we'll watch about 10 minutes of this, and then we'll do some IDs. Very exciting stuff. That's not it either. That's it.
Interdependent organs.
Here we go. Can you pull those back lines for me? Yeah, that would require. Other side. There you go.
Hi, Mum. Yeah. No. Just a minute. I'm just going to.
David and Laura's bodies are incredibly sophisticated, each one a finely balanced system of interdependent organs.
Laura wants to say hello.
Hello.
Yeah, that was Laura. Yeah.
But in their complexity lies a vulnerability.
Are the glasses fragile? She says.
Damage to just one small part of this system can have dramatic consequences.
We'll never only ate something about the.
Even during sleep, David is aware of the world around him. The sound of the alarm triggers electrical signals to fire toward a part of the brain that never sleeps, the brainstem. It's the on-off switch for consciousness. It responds by sending a wake-up call to the sleeping parts of David's brain. A single signal ignites a huge area of the brain into life. Without this vital link, it would be impossible for David to wake up.
What time is it?
How'd you get?
Oh, but I'm so comfy.
I know, but it is time to get up.
Laura and David are their brains. Their thoughts and feelings, everything that makes them who they are, is contained within this single organ. But the brain can't survive in isolation. It's connected to every organ in Laura's body via a highly sophisticated life support system. The bloodstream. Every minute, Laura's blood makes a complete circuit of her body. It gathers oxygen from the lungs and nutrients from organs like the liver. Even minor organs like the spleen played their part filtering out poisons. So pure, nourishing, oxygenated blood can be delivered to her brain. If this supply were to be interrupted for just 3 minutes, Laura would die.
You almost done there.
Yeah, that's all it is.
Oh, David, what am I going to do with this? This looks terrible.
You have to iron these inside out.
Yeah?
Mm-hmm.
Are you sure?
I cannot believe I'm going to iron your dress.
You're so good.
Thank you.
It's okay, don't help me.
Hey, this is the 21st century.
For you. Oh, have it?
Yes.
How are you looking funny?
A little late.
So, who else is going to this wedding?
Well, pretty much the same crowd as Simon's mum. A happy couple, obviously. Simon's done. Fresh from their honeymoon. Uncle Dave will be there. And he won't be flirting with you this time because he's bringing his lovely new wife.
Oh, what's she called?
I'm not sure. Well, I'm not sure he's sure.
Hi, Mum. Yeah. Oh, just a minute. I just got to, Yes, of course, we've got it. Well, Laura wants to say hello. Say hello.
Hello.
That was Laura. And, she says, oh, the glass is fragile. About half an hour on the, something like that.
Laura's brain registers danger. Her heart beats faster, pumping more blood into her brain. Her brain is speeding up. And time actually seems to slow down. But not enough. On impact, Laura's spleen swings violently out of position, stretching the blood vessels. One ruptures and starts to leak. David's brain slams against his skull, severing connections and disrupting signals all the way down to his brainstem. His conscious brain is switched off.
Okay, Laura, I'm just going to put this machine onto your finger. I'm just going to check your blood pressure. Don't worry, everything's okay.
Is he badly hurt?
Let me just check your blood pressure.
Where's David?
David's okay. He's in the other ambulance.
26 control over. 26 onward. 1 now unconscious. Serious head time critical. Constant.
David's condition is serious. He is still unconscious. Parts of his brain lie in shattered ruins. The only reason he's alive is because the reflex centers of his brain that control his breathing and heartbeat survived the crash.
Okay, don't worry now.
Laura is in better shape. Her body is already at work repairing itself. The blood from the ruptured vessel feeding her spleen is congealing to form a clot, sealing the tear and stemming the flow of blood. while Laura's body heals, David's is getting much worse. Beneath David's skull, a major artery has burst. But here, the bleeding won't stop. Fresh blood is flowing from the damaged artery with such force that the congealing clot is simply pushed out of the way. It squeezes David's brain, crushing the area responsible for his vital reflexes. His breathing falters. His heart rate plummets. And unless the pressure can be relieved, and soon, the